Hey guys, Justin here from PrimeDriven.com, here with Mr. Regular Car Reviews, doing a little walkthrough on the new shop. We finally got everything all set up, got our lifts in the back, and we're going to show you a little bit of what it takes to keep these 30-plus-year-old cars on the road. Good morning. All right, so these are an example of a tiny little part that we have to stock tons of because they constantly need to be replaced on old motors. So the motors that we put in these cars, known as the Gen 4 or Gen 5 3SGTEs, are generally going to have the far passenger side stud stripped out, which will cause a leaking exhaust manifold gasket.
Why was it stripped out?
Just age and heat cycling.
Oh.
So obviously the exhaust manifolds go through 1 million heat cycles, all the high temperatures from the turbo. So you're going to have a hardened steel stud in an aluminum head with a multi-steel layer gasket, and then, you know, a cast iron manifold. So you got a lot of different thermal expansion going on. So you end up with, ultimately, these things just get loose, then they get tight, then they get over-tightened, then they get stripped, and then you have to put in some new ones. So what you'll do is you'll time cert it, and then put in new stud, new nut, new exhaust manifold gasket, put it all back together, and then you will never have to go back in there again for probably another 100,000 miles. There are 4 different versions of O2 sensors, technically 5 different versions of O2 sensors as far as we're concerned. Being the one-stop MR2 shop, we have to cover all the bases. So we're gonna have Gen 2 3SGT O2 sensor, Gen 3 3SGT, Gen 4, Gen 5, 5S FE. So that's why we have to carry them and in multiples.
Here I have, and I saw this coming in, all these little nuts and knobs, and what is this? Gray T-top stud clips. What
T-top shade clips, yeah. Yeah, so these
what do these do?
When you sit inside of an MR2, which we'll do later, and then you look up, you have the T-top shades so that the sun doesn't beat down on you through the very lightly tinted T-tops. So these are the knobs that are obviously just plastic, and then the T-top shade is effectively cardboard with some carpet on it. So these will just break off. A lot of cars just won't even have their T-top shades. This is a great example of the minutia of things that we carry for guys so that they can, you know, put little parts back together, including big parts.
Pantone color number 327?
Oh, that's old. This is like an old label from when we had this box with different stuff. Oh. So these are just door handle bezels. Oh. That being a tan one, and then black, Mark IIs. These are Mark 1s.
Oh, these were ones that I had.
Yeah, yeah. This box right here is the rear subframe inserts. We have a company called Racer X make a number of our components for us that are basically like one-off or reproductions of things that no longer exist. These are just kind of new. Like, people kept asking for them, so we had them made.
Not ashamed to admit I don't know what they are. What are rear subframe?
The subframes on our cars are just basically stamped steel. And what happens to them often is, after a couple times coming on and off, you are going to have them get either stripped or hardware snapped in them. So then guys will have to drill them out. They'll have to tap them. They'll have to do all kinds of annoying stuff. So these are basically one of the solutions to that. It's just a little billet aluminum.
Oh, and an explanation where they are and how to put them in.
Yeah, so the stuff that we have made comes with little instruction manuals, how to put them in. It's just nice to have it kind of, you know, explained out so they don't have to guess, and then you put them in backwards, and then you're like, hey, my stuff doesn't work. So it helps the customer, and it helps us not have to answer the same question 1,000 times. So you're going to have the Gen 2 upper idlers, the Gen 3, which are on their way from Japan, the Gen 4. These are all Gen 2 you can get domestically, but we get everything from Japan in bulk. And then the Gen 4s are Japan only, because obviously the Gen 4 didn't exist in the US. Right. Over in the back here, we have a rare side-by-side example in the new shop, which is the old and busted and the new hotness. So the old and busted is what was a perfectly good engine 27 years ago, the Gen 2 3SGTE, and still a good engine. I mean, it's better than a heck of a lot of engines. But in terms of 3SGT evolution, this, with its 2-piece manifold and turbo, with the center feed intake manifold, distributor ignition system, this is your factory USDM Gen 2 CT26 turbo. Old 80s turbo tech, very laggy, and then falls on its face. So it's really not doing anything until $4,000, and then at 55 it falls on its face. The Gen 4 has the CT15 turbo, which is a single piece manifold and turbine housing, just like most of your modern stuff. A much faster spool and a much wider torque curve. So this turbo spool is at 2,000 RPM and it makes turbo power basically all the way to redline, which is 7,250. You'll see a little drop off on the dyno after like 67, 6,800. You don't need to run it that high. Like the thing is in peak torque at 3,250. So
wow.
You don't need to have it rev the nuts off it to get any power out of it. Whereas the 26, you got to rev it and then it stops doing something. So, and then you have the Gen 4, you have coil on plug, side feed intake manifold, map sensor, getting rid of the silly AFM that used to hang off the side of the Gen 2.
What is the, and I know I can see the difference between side feed and center feed, but what does this do as far as airflow?
Yeah, so in terms of performance or reliability, even so, is the center feed, the main problem is that the air comes in effectively what is the middle, not quite, and then it has to then disperse out into the manifold and then down into the plenum runners. The issue with that is that it's inherently flawed because it's not like it's amazingly designed in there. It's good, but once you go to higher boost levels, especially if you're going to a bigger turbo, we'll generally see a lean cylinder condition on cylinder 3. Even guys have had that happen on, on stock ECUs if they're running a bigger turbo, and they'll get a lean and then they'll pop the ringland and then, there goes your motor. The side feed on the Gen 4, which is also would be shared with, like an RB Skyline motor, a Supra motor, your side feed, the air comes in and then just basically gets to drop down each plenum. So you're not hitting a wall and then having to spread. You're just coming in and then going down. So most of your high-end manifolds for any motor are going to be a side feed design or something very similar. And this manifold and turbo setup on the 15B is literally half the weight of this two-piece Gen 2. This is 80 pounds.
Ooh.
Just this manifold and this turbo. It's ludicrously heavy. That's a little under 40. So the whole oil pan, the Gen 2 to the Gen 4, effectively the only thing that stayed the same is the displacement. It's 2 liters. It's still a 3S GTE. The water pump is the same, and that's pretty much it. The oil pan on these, obviously, is just a single piece stamped steel. Like most of your stuff back then. The Gen 4, which is started in the Gen 3, has a 2-piece upper aluminum, lower steel. And there's actually windage trays in the upper aluminum pan. So oil starvation on the Gen 2s was very common on the track because oil's just sloshing around just like your minivan, oil pan. Whereas on the Gen 3, the Gen 4, Gen 5, you have the windage trays in there. You have really we've tried to oil starve these motors, like full slicks, 275 slicks, like 2.5 G's around a corner, and still it won't starve. You'd have to be really low on oil to starve it. So here we are with our Mohawk 2-post lifts. 2 reasons we have these. 1, everyone who knows cars know that Mohawk makes the best lifts. And 2 is these are the no base plate lifts. So they have much lower arms so they can get underneath our body kitted cars. The body kits still require, you gotta put some pieces of blocks of wood underneath to be able to get them on the lift, but these arms are much easier to do. The reason we have these lifts is twofold. 1, so that we can build the giveaway cars, and 2, in response to the last few giveaway cars, a bunch of people have asked for builds. So what we're going to do is we're going to start doing what we used to do a few years ago, which is we're going to build cars done, ready for sale, turnkey. So they will look similar to, or in some cases exactly like, previous giveaway cars. And that will be, but to the body kits, the colors, wheels, suspension, motors. So like our Gen 4 motors, all of the cool stuff that you see on the giveaway cars. That'll now be available shortly, coming to a Facebook ad near you. So now that you've seen the shop, see a little bit of what goes into keeping these cars on the road and bringing them back, we're gonna head on out and take a ride in giveaway car number 8. Click the next video and get over there.